Hi, I'm Andrew and this is Franklin, and in this episode of the Unpopular Views we're going to talk about how to choose a van. Hello and welcome along to episode 2 of the Unpopular Views, how I chose a van and why I went for a long wheelbase Sprinter. So let's get into it. Just before I start, I would like to say, if you're interested in anything van life whatsoever, if you could give us a subscribe and like this video, that would be a massive help. It really does mean a lot. Thank you very much. So, I'm going to take you through my thought process to choosing a van, and how I decided to choose a van and how I ended up coming to the Sprinter. And I'm going to break it down bit by bit so that anyone that's looking at choosing a van and not sure which one to go for, this should really help you. This should really make it easy, and by the end of it you should have an absolute concrete idea of which kind of size van that you're looking at going for. So number one, there's three, so let me just break it down a little bit more than that. So there's three questions that I would say that are really important to ask yourself. I'm going to go through those three questions, and then those three questions help to answer the next part, which then makes it really easy for you to break it down into which van that you need. So number one is why are you doing this? Why are you buying a van to convert? So are you doing it because you want to cut costs? So you want to move out of the home and into a van. You want to be able to have a cheaper standard of living, so you have to do less work, earn less money, etc., etc., more free time, that kind of thing. Or are you doing it for travel? So are you doing it because you want to travel more, or travel in the van, maybe just on weekends or full time? Combining travel with work, maybe in the van, and cutting costs. Is it just holidays? So are you just planning on going on, weekends away, maybe a week to Spain or Portugal, or a couple of weeks away, something like that? Or is it going to be your full-time home, like mine is? Is it going to be somewhere where you live and eat, sleep, drink, spend all your time living in that van? So that's the first question, why. Very, very important start. Then number two is, where do you plan on going with the van? And this is not specific as to a location, because that doesn't really affect the choice of the van. It's more for weather purposes. So are you planning on going to hot countries, cold countries? Do you plan on spending all your time chasing the sun? Do you also want to go to some ski resorts, or spend some time in the winter, or spend a lot of time in England? If you're living in the van, are you going to be living in England, for example? So yeah, that's the where. And number three is, do you want it to be off-grid, or do you want it to be not off-grid? And for anyone who's not sure what that means, off-grid is basically, you can survive without an electrical hookup. You don't need water pumped into the van. You have all the facilities that you need to just be able to basically go and park anywhere, whether it be a desert or the middle of the forest somewhere with nothing around you, no toilet facilities, no shower facilities, no cooking facilities, and you're able to survive like that. That would be off-grid. The other option is that you would be going to caravan parks where they would have an electrical hookup, and you could plug the van into it and use the electricity. They might have shower blocks and toilets and things like that. And if they've got those, then it obviously changes your decision. So these are the three questions that, if you can answer these questions, then it massively helps you in the next stage of the decision process. The next stage of the decision process is, what do you class as essential? And the reason why, obviously, the previous part of the video matters here is that, for example, if for the where you answered that you'd only be going to destinations like the south of France, Portugal in the summer, Spain in the summer, then an inside shower might not be essential for you. But if you plan on going away in the winter to ski resorts, etc., then an inside shower becomes essential, because you can't live without that. So that's an example of that one. Also, if you don't plan on going off-grid very often, then large water capacity maybe isn't essential either. So in this van, for example, I've got 150 litres. It's very good. It can last me 7 days if I'm being economical with it. But if I wasn't planning on being off-grid in the van, then I wouldn't need a 150 litre water tank. I could have a much smaller one, 30-40 litres, maybe something like that would be sufficient if I wasn't planning on spending a lot of time off-grid. If you don't plan on going to cold destinations, then heating becomes less essential. We've been in the van for 6 months now, and since March I haven't touched the heating. I still use the hot water because sometimes it gets a little bit cold, and obviously for washing dishes, etc. And it's convenient, but heating definitely not essential. Only when I've been in ski resorts has it been an essential part. So if you don't plan on going to somewhere that's cold, then heating maybe isn't something that you'd class as essential. So you can kind of see why the questions from previously matter to your decision of what is essential in your van life. So I've made a list of the things that you should try and decide if you think they're essential, or if they're a kind of luxury as such. So water capacity would be one of them. So again, if you don't plan on going off grid, do you need a big water capacity? Probably not, because you'll be using showers from campsites or public showers, etc., and so you don't need a big water capacity. So your water tank can be much smaller. Electrical capacity. So do you plan on, again, going off grid? Do you need a good electrical capacity, or will you be plugged in a lot of the time to shore power, in which case your electrical setup will be much smaller if you plan on being plugged in a lot of the time. Do you need LPG? So one question, do you need LPG, relates to some LPG powers hot water and heating, and ours also powers our cooking, our oven. So if you plan on going off grid, then I would say LPG is definitely a really good option. But if you're not planning on going off grid, then I wouldn't worry about it. We've got a 38 litre underslung LPG tank, which is a bit of weight and a bit of expense. For me, I think it's essential, and that was why I fitted it. But for some people, it's definitely not essential, and they can live without it. If you need it, do you just need it for cooking when you're going away for weekends? If so, you could maybe use a bottled LPG, like you can buy in a petrol station, for example. Or do you plan on being in the van for longer? So that kind of relates to the why you plan on converting the van. If you're planning on only going away for weekends, then bottled LPG probably works absolutely fine, and you can just put a space for a bottled LPG into the van. Hot water and heating. So is hot water and heating essential to you? Again, like I said before, heating for me probably wouldn't be essential if we weren't going to -16 degrees and -20 degrees and staying in ski resorts, etc. Then heating for me would not be essential. I don't even think in the UK heating for me would be essential. There are some cold nights, but we've got the oven, grill, the hob, for example. We could use those to heat the van if needed. Internal or external shower would be the next one. Do you need an internal shower? Again, if you go into cold places, then probably yes. If you plan on living in the van for a long time, probably yes, especially in England. But if you plan on living in the van in England and you have a Pure Gym membership, for example, or a membership to any other gym, then you might be able to get showers there, and that might make it more suitable. That might mean that your van can be a little bit smaller. Do you want a fixed bed, or are you happy with a rock and roll style bed? So for me, I lived in the van in Australia for a while, and we had a bed that you could convert into seats, and in 18 months I think I converted it into seats maybe twice, and it just was pointless. I didn't want to have to unmake and remake my bed every single day. That was a massive thing for me. I just wanted to be able to put the duvet on, have the bed there, and forget about it for the day. You know, I can put stuff on there like the blinds that we use for the windows, put those kind of things on there, but I want to be able just to leave it and forget about it. So for me, a fixed bed was essential. I couldn't be doing with taking the bed apart so that I could sit down. That's just not for me. So fixed bed became essential. What kind of cooking facilities do you need? So do you need an oven, or are you just planning on going away for a few days at a time? In which case, I'm sure you can just manage with a hob. You can cook a lot of foods just on a hob. So what cooking facilities are essential to you personally when you're choosing your van? I wanted an oven because I'd lived in a van before without an oven, and I decided that I missed things. And if I wanted to live in a van this time, then I wanted an oven. It was important for me. I wanted to be able to cook roast dinners and pizzas and stuff like that. So yeah, that became essential. Also, do those facilities need to be inside, or could you have them outside? So could you have a little gas grill that you take outside and cook on that? If you plan on going to hot countries, then maybe that's suitable. But if you plan on being in cold countries, then probably not. Again, it's about deciding what's essential and what's not essential so that you can decide on the size of a van. Next, we've got what kind of washing up facilities do you need? Do you plan on being in campsites more often than not? In which case, then you probably won't need washing up facilities. That's probably not essential to you. Or do you plan on being off grid? In which case, then you're going to need at least a sink, somewhere to wash dishes. And does that need to be internal or external? Again, where do you plan on going to? Activity storage. So I've added this one in because I do think it's important. What do you plan on doing in the van? So I know that a lot of people that live in a van don't generally do too much in the way of activities. They might do a lot of hiking, but not stuff that needs a lot of equipment. So are you a surfer? Do you plan on going skiing? Do you want to have your mountain bikes in there? Do they want to be inside or outside? So for example, you could put a roof box on, but a roof box for me takes away from the kind of stealth aspect of the van, and in which case I don't want the roof box. I wanted everything to be internal. I also want to be able to be quite discreet when we park up somewhere. So I don't want people to immediately look at the van and say that's a camper van. So I wanted everything to be inside the van. So do you have surfboards? Do you have skis that you want to be taking with you? Do you have a mountain bike that you want to be taking with you? If you do, and you want it to be kept internally, then you're going to need a good sized garage in the back of it. If not, then it's no problem. And if you do want it, but you want it external, then again, the size of the van won't really be too affected by your choice of what you want to take. Toilet is definitely the next one that I would say. Is a toilet essential for you? I would say that if you plan on living in the van full time, then you absolutely cannot live without a toilet. Then my next question would be, how much privacy do you need while you're on the toilet? Do you need a separate room for the toilet? We have a separate bathroom. I just think that for me it made sense. I think it adds a little bit of value to the van that it's got its own separate toilet and shower, and that was why I decided to do it. But 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 some people wouldn't class it as as an essential part of their van. And finally, do you need standing room in the van? So again, when do you plan on being in the van? How long do you plan on being in the van? Do you plan on going to cold countries? Do you plan on needing to cook in the van? If you do need to cook in the van, then you're probably going to need standing room. So it's a case of head height. So will you need a tall van, or will a shorter van be okay? So if you can give yourself an answer to all of these questions, then you're going to be able to have a good idea of what options you have. And just as a general rule, I'd say that if you plan on being in a van for long periods, if you plan on going off grid, or if you plan on going to cold locations, then you're probably going to need a larger van, especially one with headroom. So for example, a Ford Transit or a Volkswagen Transporter, for example, isn't suitable. You're going to be looking more into like your Citroen Relays, your Mercedes-Benz Sprinters, Volkswagen Transporters, Volkswagen Crafters, sorry. They're going to be more where you're looking. But if you plan on going on shorter trips and you plan on being in the warmer locations and you plan on staying in campsites more often, then you can probably get away with a smaller van. So VW Transporter, Ford Transit, Citroen Relay, medium-sized vans, I would say, are going to be a good option for you. So that's what I would use for taking into consideration when I'm thinking about purchasing a van. One last thing that I would say, and it's something that I did when I was choosing a van, and I think it's definitely worth taking into consideration. And for me, it was a big deciding factor. I mentioned previously that I'm quite strategic about how I choose to do things, and money is normally a factor. I'm quite financially astute with those kind of decisions. So it's important to ask yourself, are the vans just for investment or fun? Do you plan on accepting that you're going to lose money on it, and etc., etc., and that is the end of it? Or do you plan on making it a little bit of an investment so that you can enjoy your holidays, but then at the end of it you've got an asset? What I did when I was choosing a van was I looked at vans that my van will be in 5 years time or 10 years time to see how much they're worth. So for example, I bought a 5-year-old van that had 60,000 miles on the clock. So I assumed that I would put 10,000 miles on it every year. So that meant that in 5 years time it was going to be 10 years old with 110,000 miles on the clock. So what I did was I went online, I went onto Auto Trader, I went onto other camping websites, Quirky Campers, those kind of websites, and I tried to find vans that were that age, done up to a standard that I was going to do to, and with that many miles on, to see what they were worth. So for example, if I can buy the van for 10.5 grand and put 5 grand into it, then I've spent 15 grand. In 5 years time, what is that van going to be worth? Is it going to be worth £10,000? Is it going to be worth £20,000? Is it going to be worth £30,000? In which case it gives me a good idea of how much I can spend on it without putting myself into almost negative equity. So I think that's a really, really good way of looking at it. I also did the same for 10 years time. So I looked at a 15-year-old Sprinter that was converted to a nice standard with 150,000 miles on the clock. And that was how I had a look at it. So if I was doing it again, I would definitely do exactly the same thing. I thought it gave me a really good indication that I wasn't overpaying for the van, that I wasn't wasting my money, and that in 5 years or 10 years time I'll get a return on the investment. And that became an important part of it for me. So yeah, for me personally, I had very little choice. I really had a lot of requirements, and I just had to go for the Beast option, and that is why I'm bringing you this video, this vlog from inside my long wheelbase Mercedes Sprinter. Thank you for watching. I hope I've helped you, and if there's anything that you've liked, please hit the subscribe, give us a like. It's really appreciated and it does mean a lot. So thank you very much. Have a good day.